Hi family, so today's video is going to be regarding what I like to call the punishment paradigm when raising children. Okay, let's get into it. Now, what I mean by the punishment paradigm, in a lot of families, there are very strict consequences for going on the wrong side or doing what you're not supposed to do or even forgetting to do things, right? But a lot of times there is not an equal amount of reward for doing the right things. And so an imbalance occurs. And this is when the child gets raised on mostly the punishment paradigm. So when you do good things, you might be told things such as, well, you better do what's right before you get in trouble again. Now you just did something that was good, right? You better do what's right before you get in trouble again. But when you do something bad, you get your tail beat, you get whatever else, whatever your little luxuries are as a child taken away. You can't play outside, you can't play at all, you can't go nowhere, you can't see nobody, you can't talk on the phone. Everything gets taken away, right? Now, the issue with this type of paradigm is that number one, it's not very sustainable. And what I mean by that is this: even if the person in authority over the child is able to sustain that level of punishment all the time, what tends to happen is that the child becomes numb to it and the child becomes immune to it. Because once you can't play, you can't go outside, you can't talk to nobody, you can't this, you can't that, that's the height. There's nothing more that can be taken away from you except oxygen, right? And most children in that type of situation, they don't even care if the oxygen goes because it's already like they're being stifled anyway. But the on the other side, when they do good things, there's no reward for that. There's only more threats of losing other supposed privileges, even though you just did something good. Now, there's two things that happens there. Number one, I can tell you from my practice, my therapy practice, working with parents and their children, right? I'm a holistic therapist. I get a lot of parent child clients come into me. What tends to happen with parents working with their parents and their children on this particular punishment paradigm is that the parent then becomes extremely impatient. Um, they become very resentful towards the child because it's like, I've been taking everything away from the child and nothing is working. And they don't realize that by them having this level of reaction to whatever the child does bad, be it small or big, is actually counterproductive to the parent, because you then lose the power to influence the child's behavior because you've done everything there is to do. They're no longer listening because they realize you can't take anything else away from them, maybe except their bed and clothes. And even then, they'll adjust to that too. So in therapy, what tends to happen is that the parent feels as though as if the child is extremely rebellious and they just don't listen, and the child doesn't want to make the parent's life easier. That tends to be the story that the parent tells themselves. What they don't realize is that because they're now firmly entrenched in the punishment paradigm, the child then loses respect for the parent. The child becomes numb. The parent has no influence over the child anymore because, after all, whether I do something small or I do something big, you take away absolutely everything. In the child's mind, that creates instability because in their mind, there's no stepping stone to the levels of punishment. It's like everything just becomes shouting, screaming, and you take everything away. And so the parent realizes they no longer have influence on the child. And one of the things that my parents and I in therapy work on is Learning how to speak the language of the child that they created or the child that they're in charge of. When you use punishment as a method of changing a child's behavior, you have to have an arsenal of tools to do so, so that the child can understand that there's levels to the punishment that is being meted out. Otherwise, child no longer cares about what the parent does. They lose respect for them. They tend to feel as though as if the parent doesn't even see them. They're just an object that the parent just wants them to obey whatever they say, right? That's in therapy. So typically we tend to work on communication. We tend to work on the idea of both parent and child, work on the idea of consequences and rewards. A lot of times there are a plethora of consequences, but there are no rewards. And what tends to happen, the parent tends to think, well, I don't want to reward this child because they were bad last week. They were bad last week. They weren't bad this week. How will they know when they're doing something good if you don't let them know? Right? But because the parent fears that, oh, I don't want the child to think that their behavior is okay, I'm just not going to reward them at all. That never works. It always blows up. Absolutely. And that type of paradigm, one of the things that I have to explain to my parents that this is what's going to happen in your relationship with the child as the child grows up is this. My second point. When a child is raised under the punishment paradigm, what that does is that tends to impact their psyche and their self-esteem. They can never do anything right. That's the messaging that begins to play in the child's head. They can never do anything right. They may or may not be a failure in life. Love is something that is unattainable, particularly if you're bad, you don't get love. And so if a child stays in trouble for a very long time, child feels unloved, right? When that child then grows into an adult, there are a couple of things that begin to present itself. There's a numbness to life that begins to present itself. And this type of numbness, you tend to only see it if you're around that child, that adult for a period of time. Then you'll begin to see glimpses of it. They'll begin to feel numb because they didn't get the emotional support that they needed as a child. So now as an adult, they've cauterized themselves off from any other person, and they don't feel as though as if they can be bothered with people, because people tend to just come with negative consequences. One of the other things that tends to happen is that the personality of the adult can become very brittle, easy to break, like thin glass. They don't know how to react appropriately in situations. Because in their mind, even as an adult, whenever something goes wrong, they tend to, in their mind, cower in a corner and wait to be punished. Now, you might not know that because you're on the other side of whatever it is. And what you might experience from such an adult is that they might lash out at you. They might say things that don't even pertain to the situation. And you're like, what are they talking about? When really it's that inner child that is screaming out because they're in trouble. Something has triggered them. They get triggered very easily, goes without saying. And then they do not know how to properly regulate their emotions as adults, because as children, their emotions were never taken into consideration. They were just an object that was either going to obey or defy instruction. So there's a lot that comes with raising children under a punishment paradigm. I've never seen it work out well. I've never seen a well-adjusted person that was raised in that way, unless as they grew up. they began to do the work to heal and reparent themselves. But in general, it is just not a great idea to deal with your children under these types of circumstances, because there is a payment that will have to be made later on in life. And a lot of times, the cost of such a paradigm is the cost of the parent child relationship. That is the fee for raising a child under the paradigm of punishment. Children have feelings. Children react to their environment the same way that adults do. They have their own feelings. They have their own perception of what's going on around them. There are other people around them that they are learning to deal with in their own different ways. And so, a lot of times, when the parent begins to have the child under the punishment paradigm, they'll tell me, for example, they'll say, well, he was good until the age of 7. When he hit 7, he just got bad. I don't know what happened. This is what the parents is going to tell me. Now, when I go to that child and I use my method of inquiry with that child, a lot of times you will find that that badness that the parent perceives, actually, that same moment that the child became bad is the same moment that the child may have been violated by somebody that they either trusted or didn't know. It's the same moment that the child may have felt unsafe. And so they begin to act out as a way of protecting themselves. It is the same moment that something as simple as the child feels like they're no longer seen in the home. They begin to act out. And that is a coping mechanism to protect themselves. So family, I just want to encourage you. If you are in charge of a child, you are trusted to raise that child, or if you have your own child, I know in particular a lot of mothers with sons, they tend to fall into this paradigm a lot because there's a lot about the masculine energy that women don't quite understand. There's a lot about how a young boy is that can be foreign to a lot of women. If you find that your child is acting out or acting bad, so on and so forth, pinpoint within a 2-year to a 6-month timeline. Okay, so slide the timer in between there and pinpoint exactly when did things start going downhill. And when you do that, I would like you to sit down with that child and have a conversation with them. And the conversation isn't going to be, oh, I'm going to beat your ass. Okay? Have the conversation be something like this. What happened around April last year? How were you feeling around that time? Is there anything that you think can be done differently so that the situation at home can improve? I know for a lot of us, especially in certain communities, these are foreign concepts. But these very foreign concepts are the things that are going to bring your child back to you, and they're going to save them from looking for things outside that they already have inside. Okay? So let's examine this punishment paradigm that we tend to raise children under, whereby we don't give them any rewards for good behavior, but we sure know how to mete out punishment for bad behavior. It is not sustainable, and the price that you will pay is your relationship with the child. I hope you find value in this video, family. Let me know down below, and take care.